Welcome to the Woman's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen, your moderator. The Woman's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned? Welcome. There are two words that strike fear in the lives of every woman, and they are breast cancer. With me today is a woman who has come up with some innovative ways to combat this disease and stay healthy. And I would like to welcome Christine Horner. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
You wrote a book called Waking the Warrior Goddess. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the book first?
Sure. The book is all the research-proven ways that women can dramatically lower the risk of getting breast cancer. And they're also the same ways or things that can help women who have breast cancer successfully fight their disease.
All right. Women die of breast cancer every 12 seconds in this country. Mm-hmm. How come the statistics are so high?
Well, we're doing a lot of things wrong. And we're not doing a lot of things that are right. So what I did, I'm actually a plastic surgeon.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
And I did a lot of breast reconstruction in my practice. I got very interested in breast cancer early on because my mother had developed breast cancer but had apparently successfully fought it. And then in the early 1990s, insurance companies stopped paying for breast reconstruction after mastectomies. So I spearheaded the legislative effort to make it mandatory that insurance companies pay for breast reconstruction.
Yay.
Yes. So I met with President Clinton and worked with Senator Kennedy, and we were able to get the legislation passed in 1998. But early in that campaign, my mother developed breast cancer again. And they thought they caught it early, but she ended up dying 9 months later. And so, I thought, I don't want this. I know what it's like. I take care of patients who have breast cancer, and I know that even if we catch it early, you still have to go through surgery and chemotherapy and radiation, and this is certainly not something that I'd like to go through, and I don't want to see other women going through it. So I thought there's got to be things that women can do that can dramatically lower the risk of getting this disease.
So what did you find when you started doing some research?
Well, what I did was, I looked through the medical literature and I thought, is there anything that, indicates of that as contributing to the breast cancer epidemic or things that we can do to help protect ourselves. And what I found was literally thousands of studies showing that natural things, so these are foods, supplements, activities, going to bed by 10 o'clock, things like that, can have an unbelievable effect in either, contributing to breast cancer or protecting against it. And what I found was that really, we know exactly why we have a breast cancer epidemic. We know all the things that are contributing to it, and we know how to probably lower the risk of a woman getting breast cancer by 80–90%, very simply.
So how come it's not happening?
Because the information has not gotten out. And that's when I first went through the medical literature. I was delighted that I found all this. And then I was quite upset because I thought, here I am, a physician. I'm extremely highly trained. I'm board certified in general surgery and plastic surgery. And it's, I've had no information of this through medical school, none through my residency, and then as a practicing physician, none of it in my continuing medical education classes. So physicians don't know this, even though it's in the medical literature, and women don't know this. So that's my passion now, is to get this information out.
Now, how come people aren't getting it out? I mean,
well,
if it's been known for so many years.
I think that only bits and pieces have been known, and I think that most physicians, and when I would tell my friends this is too much information, but most physicians don't have time to read. They're taking care of patients all the time and doing paperwork, and when I was a practicing physician, it was very common for me to work 12 hours a day, and you don't have time to read the medical literature. And so even though it's there, it's kind of lost information, I guess, that most people aren't aware of until we have someone like me who, just decides that I'm going to take this position where it's like, okay, I am going to find out, what the answers are here. And in order for me to write the book, I actually decided to leave my practice.
What exactly causes breast cancer?
There are many things that contribute to the cause of breast cancer. So this whole thing that we've had where it was like, what is the cause of breast cancer? There isn't one thing. And what it is a number of things that contribute to it. So principally, it's our diet has a lot to do with it. So what they have found is that women who eat red meat, the most red meat, and particularly if it's grilled or well done.
Oh my goodness, that's my favorite.
A 400% increased risk of breast cancer. And the reason is because when we grill meats, there's new carcinogens that are formed called heterocyclic amines, and they're extremely carcinogenic, and so that's why well done and grilled red meats are much higher. Meat itself has many factors in it that contribute to the elevated risk of breast cancer, and part of it has to do with the protein in the meat that when it's cooked becomes carcinogenic, and also the saturated animal fats have an effect in our body that cause inflammation, which will promote not only breast cancer but many other diseases, and also the saturated animal fats are a storehouse for environmental toxins and all the things that we pump into our animals, so growth hormones and things like that.
They say that you should really cook your meat well done.
Well,
yes, because of
I say you shouldn't eat it at all.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, because that's a a real problem is the health problems associated with eating meat are not just breast cancer, also prostate cancer and heart disease and high blood pressure and cholesterol and on and on. So it's not a good thing for us to consume, and the research is something that proves it over and over again.
What else can we do to increase our health?
Well, besides, there's many things that you can do that you should avoid, I say,
right.
and things that you should favor. So the things that we know that we should not be doing that we do as a society is eating the red meat. Also, sugars and refined carbohydrates. They found that these sugar is actually something that is the preferred food for cancer. So the more sugar you eat, the faster tumors will grow. And when we eat sugars and refined carbohydrates, what happens is our body will release insulin. And there's actually insulin receptors on the tumors, and they act like growth hormone essentially. So when insulin attaches onto the receptors on the cancer cells, it speeds up the growth of the cancer cells. Another thing that we do is drink alcohol. And they have found a direct linear relationship between alcohol and breast cancer. So if you drink one drink a day, your risk increases by 11%.
When you say alcohol, are you including wine?
Everything. Wine, beer, yes, all of it. So one drink a day increases your risk by 11%. 2 drinks by 22 to 40%, and 3 drinks by 33 to 70%.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know that. And we have this thing where we say, oh, you should drink a glass of red wine every day for your heart, conditions, that it helps for that or Alzheimer's. But I say, well, if you probably drank like antifreeze, it might be good for your heart condition too, but it's a poison. And alcohol is a poison for our system. It's something that, as I said, has a direct linear relationship with breast cancer, not to mention all the terrible problems that people have when they get excessive amount of drinking and the family problems it causes and so on. So there's many things that people can do that are healthy.
Okay, let's go on to what's the healthy part.
Okay. Well, the things that people can do proactively are favoring a plant-based diet. We know that within plants there are many, many nutrients and minerals, and also what are called plant chemicals or phytochemicals. And these chemicals are things that have no calories to them. They don't supply any energy or anything for us, but what they do is a variety of just unbelievably miraculous techniques for helping to keep us healthy. So for instance, cruciferous vegetables, so these are things like broccoli and cauliflower and kale. The commonality is they have a cross in their stem. That's why they're called cruciferous vegetables. So they come from this one family, and they have several different chemicals to them that are extremely specific in helping to fight cancer, and particularly breast cancer. So one of them is called indole 3-carbinol, and if you find it in a supplement, it's usually called DIM, because that's how our body uses it, or DIM. And what it does is it will create more of a good kind of estrogen in our body. What they have found is that with breast cancer, it's considered a hormonal disease, and that hormone is estrogen. And what that means is that estrogen is something that causes the cancer to grow and divide. And so the more estrogen we're exposed to over a lifetime, the higher our risk of breast cancer. There's also many different types of estrogens. So some of them are actually good and protective, and other ones are not good. And so when we have estrogen, what it does is it hooks onto the estrogen receptors in the breast cells, causes them to grow and divide. And then when we're getting rid of the estrogen in our body, it goes to our liver and it gets broken down into a good kind of estrogen or a bad kind of estrogen. So just like we have a good kind of cholesterol and a bad kind of cholesterol, we have the same thing with estrogen. And just like their names, the good kind of estrogen is one that's protective, and the bad kind is one that can really accelerate the growth of breast cancer. And indole-3-carbinol, or DIM, from cruciferous vegetables causes our body to make more of the good kind of estrogen and less of the bad kind of estrogen.
Blood test to find out whether or not you've got too much estrogen, the good kind and the bad kind?
You can actually do it very simply with a urine test, and you can order it on the internet.
You can order it.
You can. There's a test called Estronex that you can order, and you just sample your own urine, and then you send it into the company, and they can tell you what your ratio is of the good kind and the bad kind of estrogen.
Has chemotherapy helped our lives or hindered our lives if you have breast cancer?
Statistically, if you have chemotherapy, your likelihood of surviving your disease is higher. Not tremendously higher, but it is higher. There's actually not that many tumors that are very sensitive to chemotherapy, but there are things that you can do to help chemotherapy. So we were talking about eating a plant-based diet. Now there's also certain types of plants. Green tea, for instance, is something that's been found to be incredibly protective against cancers, and it can help women who are taking chemotherapy. So what they found is that, and to me this is just amazing, they found that green tea will affect a pump mechanism on the cell membrane. And so it will pump more chemotherapy into the tumor cells. And researchers found that the concentration of chemotherapy inside the tumor cell is 2.5 to 3 times higher in the presence of green tea. And it will pump it out of normal cells. So what it's doing is it's enhancing the effectiveness of chemotherapy while protecting the body against organ damage.
How much green tea a day should somebody drink?
Usually what they found is that you need to drink about 8 to 10 cups of green tea a day. Now, some people would find that difficult. So
yeah,
there's actually supplements that you can take of green tea that are just as effective. I mean, there are a lot of different supplements that can be incredibly protective in helping women prevent breast cancer, but also helping women who have breast cancer as well. So green tea is one of them. Turmeric, which is the Indian spice, and it's that bright yellow-orange color in curry, so it's incredibly medicinal. And it does things like it beefs up the enzymes in our livers so that it's more effective at getting rid of cancer cells and carcinogenic type toxins that are in our bodies. It will shut off the blood supply to tumors. And this is a new type of chemotherapy that they've created, which works the exact same way. If you don't have the blood supply, which is bringing the nutrients and oxygen to a tumor, then it can't grow. So turmeric is something that will help to shut off the blood supply to the tumors. And it also decreases the amount of estrogen that we have in our body. And another very interesting effect that it has is some of our environmental toxins will mimic the estrogen molecule. And so what it does, and only it's worse, it's stronger than our natural estrogen, and it will cause tumors to grow even faster. And so you think, well, what the heck can you do about that? Because you're just exposed to these environmental toxins. Well, turmeric is something that will decrease the estrogenic effect of these environmental toxins. So basically it's making them less toxic in our bodies. So there's things you can do to protect yourself from these environmental toxins. That's one. Another is eating a lot of broccoli or taking DIM as a supplement, because it will cause more of that good kind of estrogen, whereas environmental toxins will cause more of the bad kind of estrogen. So you can kind of manipulate things in your body with these good foods and supplements.
Well, is there such a thing as having too much? Taking too many supplements, too
Sure,
much green tea,
absolutely.
too much turmeric?
Absolutely. So one concept that sometimes people have about herbs is that they're very weak and you can take as much as you want to, but they're actually medicine. And in ancient systems of medicine like Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, one thing we recognize is that our food is medicine. So we use our foods as medicine, and in fact, those two systems of medicine prescribe foods as their very first thing that they do in trying to get rebalancing to the body or help with any disease condition. But, you know, you can eat way too many green peas and that would probably induce cancer, you know, type of thing. So there's a proper dose for everything.
What are we doing in our society that adds to the risk of breast cancer?
Okay. What we talked about before was that we were eating red meat and refined carbohydrates and sugars, and also drinking alcohol. And other things that have been found to increase the risk of breast cancer, accelerate the growth of it, is obesity. And that's a real problem that we have in the country right now. I think the statistics are that 60% of adults are now obese. They have linked about 20 to 30% of all postmenopausal breast cancers to obesity. And the reason is that after menopause, our fat cells will produce estrogen. So the ovaries aren't the only place where we produce estrogen. Our body actually produces estrogen in other places too, and the fat cells is one of the predominant places. So after menopause, the more fat cells you have, the higher your risk of breast cancer, because it becomes a factory for estrogen, essentially.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Stress is another thing.
I think living in New York, you have stress automatically.
Right. So coming from Taos, you know, New Mexico, where it's peaceful and quiet, it's like, oh my God, the sounds here. So stress is another thing, and all of us are exposed to stress, and you can't really manage what's coming into your life as far as the stress, but there are things that you can do that will change the physiological effects of stress in your body.
Such as?
Meditation, yoga. There's certain breathing exercises called pranayama that research shows really induces a lot of relaxation into the body. And there's actually some herbs that you can take that will interrupt all the different, we have kind of a neurochemical cascade that happens when we have a stress response, and there's herbs that will interrupt that cascade or diminish or dampen the effects of it, so we can have that same stress that happens to our body, but we don't produce as much cortisol, and we don't produce as much of the other hormones that occur as far as the stress reactions, and so we don't have the physiological damage that occurs to our body just by taking an herb. Actually, there's a girlfriend of mine in Santa Fe that I was telling her about all of these incredible supplements that can make a difference, and huge differences. So for instance, they found that anti-inflammatories can lower the risk of breast cancer by as much as 50%. And this is like, you don't change your diet, you don't change your lifestyle, nothing. All you do is take an anti-inflammatory and you can reduce your risk of breast cancer by 50%.
What's an anti-inflammatory?
An anti-inflammatory, traditionally, what we talk about is like aspirin or ibuprofen. But there's actually herbal anti-inflammatories that are much safer than the pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories. So turmeric, here we go again. Turmeric is what they call a COX-2 anti-inflammatory, and that's what Celebrex and Vioxx were the COX-2 anti-inflammatories, and as we know, there's a lot of health problems associated with those. So it's much safer to take an herbal one, and what it does is it stops this enzyme that's a key enzyme in inflammation. And what researchers have found is that inflammation plays a key role in the initiation and growth of virtually all cancers and all chronic disorders.
What advice would you give to women who already have breast cancer?
Same things.
Okay.
So, basically, it doesn't matter whether you don't have it yet or whether you have it, the same things that are going to prevent it are the things that are going to help you beat it, and the same things that are going to protect your body are the same things that are going to help you shrink your tumor. I mean, these are all things like turmeric, they found, shrinks a tumor, prevents metastasis, keeps it from invading into the body, and so on. So these same things are good for women who have breast cancer as well.
There's so much information.
That's right.
And I mean, you've just given us quite a bit
That's
of information. That's just like, I have to listen to the show like a few times to
Sure.
really absorb all of it.
Right.
What suggestions would you like to give the audience to really grasp it quickly?
Right. Well, the best thing is to get my book, because then you have it in front of you. And I did, in my book, I realized as I was going through all of this is a lot of information, and it's hard to grasp all at one time. So what I did was in the last chapter, I put it into a 30-step program, but I called it Customs, because I thought, it's kind of like, what if you woke up 100 years from now, and this is the culture that you live in, and what we're doing is eating plants and taking these supplements and getting exercise and going to bed by 10 and all of that. So it's learning the customs of the new culture that you're in. So I broke it into 30 different parts,
Wow.
and that way you can do one a day or one a week or one a month, whatever is a comfortable pace for you. And I have little bullet points under each one of them so that it summarizes what I talked about in the chapter. So it's very easy to just kind of check through that.
Now, you're saying get to bed by 10 and
Yes.
get up by 6.
Yes.
Why 10 and why
Yes.
6?
Well, what researchers have found is that women who work the night shift, so night shift nurses in particular, have a 50% higher risk of breast cancer. And when they looked at why was this, one of the things that we know is that we have normal fluctuations of hormones throughout the day. And at nighttime, we have a particular hormone called melatonin that rises, and it's the sleep hormone. And it got a lot of press a few years ago because people took it for jet lag and for helping, to go to sleep. So what they found is that as it starts to get dark, melatonin will start to rise, and we start to feel sleepy. If you go to bed before 10 o'clock, your melatonin levels will rise to their highest possible level. If you don't go to bed by 10 o'clock, they won't. And the reason melatonin is so important is because it's a very powerful antioxidant, and it will also decrease the amount of estrogen that our body produces and several other hormones that they found that works like estrogen, in that it will speed up the division of cells in the breast tissue. So it's something called prolactin, epidermal growth factor, but it's too complicated. But anyway, basically it's a very, very protective hormone for us, and it's based on getting to bed before 10 o'clock and also having the lights off and being in a room that's as dark as possible. So melatonin is very sensitive to light, and even if you have a night light in your room, it will keep your melatonin levels from going up as high as they possibly could. And another interesting statistic is that blind women, so they have no light perception at all, they have a 50% lower incidence of breast cancer than the normal population. And research shows that if you take green tea with turmeric at the same time, turmeric will make the anti-cancer effects of green tea 8 times more powerful, and green tea will make turmeric's anti-cancer effects 3 times more powerful.
What about self-examination?
Self-examination is good. It's tough for women because most of us have what we call lumpy, bumpy breasts, and so when women start to examine themselves, they have no idea what they're feeling. Now, it's true that most women actually find breast tumors themselves, and so it is important to do, and what we usually recommend is that women just start doing breast exams. Yes, we know you don't know what you're feeling, but just get used to how your breasts feel, and then if you feel a difference, or if you feel something that's sticks out more than any other as far as the lumps, then that's something to be concerned about, and then you should get it checked out.
Now, there's mammograms and there's sonograms.
MRIs, thermograms.
Which do you feel is the most effective?
Well, that's a complicated question, actually, because what we're searching for is an ideal screening tool, and we don't have it. So mammograms are something that will pick up 80% of tumors, but they miss 20%. So women oftentimes they get mammograms and they think they're fine, but a mammogram can miss 20% of
That's
tumors.
That's a big percentage.
It is. And I mean, I've had cases where I had patients where their entire breast was replaced with tumor and their mammogram was normal, because you have to have calcium deposited in it for the mammogram to see it. Now, the other problem with mammograms is that what they think are suspicious,
right,
to the point where it requires a biopsy, 80% of that is incorrect. So 80% of all biopsies that we do are benign, and there's about 1 million breast biopsies that are done a year, and 800,000 of them are unnecessary. So huge medical costs, not to mention, you know, the psychological and emotional, you know, trauma to go through that. So we need something better than that, and that's why we've looked at, well, let's look at ultrasounds. Well, ultrasounds are things that just tell us whether a mass is cystic or solid. That's it. It doesn't give us a lot of information. MRI scans will show us all the tumors in the breast, but they cost $2,000 usually. So it's impractical as a screening tool. Plus, it like a mammogram will pick up things that look like they're suspicious and they're not, so it can lead to a lot of unnecessary biopsies. Now, a technology that's being I'd say revived and kind of improved is something called thermography. Mm-hmm. And what that does is an infrared picture of the breast. So it doesn't have any radiation involved in it, and it's just simply a picture of the breast. It uses an infrared camera, and it picks up heat and blood vessel patterns to the breast. And what we find is that new blood vessels will grow into a tumor before you even have a tumor that forms. So you'll get these abnormal blood vessel patterns and heat patterns to the breast before you pick anything up on mammogram, and it's extremely specific. So when there was a study done where they did mammograms and then in addition to that did thermograms, they were able to say with 98% accuracy which women should be biopsied. So it's a tool that definitely could be used in conjunction with mammograms, but I think at one point it may be able to replace it because our sophistication with it is getting so great.
Doctor, what would you like to leave the audience with?
I would like to leave the audience with the knowledge that they have tremendous power over their health and their ability to lower the risk of breast cancer. Most oftentimes we've been told that we don't know what causes breast cancer and we don't know how to cure it. It's not something that we need to fear because we have huge power in lowering our risk of breast cancer, and it's simple, natural things that everybody can do and fit into their lifestyle.
Doctor, thank you so much for
welcome.
joining
My
me.
pleasure.
It's been
Thank
wonderful.
you.
And I hope you've learned something about preventing breast cancer as I have. And here's to good health.